Jethro Tull was formed as Jethro Tull in 1968, in about March of 1968, but the four members of Jethro Tull actually got together about 4 or 5 months prior to that, at the end of 1967, and where we were still called the John Evan Band to begin with, and then we became Ian Henderson's Bag of Blues. Don't ask me why it was Ian Henderson. I think they spelt my name wrong. We were also called Navy Blue at one point, and we became Jethro Tull March 1968, which is 20 years and 5 months ago. 18th century agriculturalist, a kind of farmer, who invented a special machine to make holes in the ground to put the seeds in which would grow into corn, an automatic machine. He was a very clever chap. He was also a musician. And we were given the name Jethro Tull by our agent when we were quite young, and it was one of many names that we had when we first started playing music. We used to be given a different name every week because we were so bad as a group. The only way we could get rebooked into the clubs was to pretend to be somebody different. So we had a different name every week, and the first time we had a club owner who asked us to come back and thought we were great, we happened to be called Jethro Tull that week, so we kept the name Jethro Tull. What a boring story. Flute players to be known in rock and roll. Not the first, because before me there was the guy who played with the Moody Blues, and another guy who played in a Dutch group called Focus. There was also Chris Wood, who played in Traffic with Stevie Winwood. But I was probably the first guy who brought the flute to be the main instrument in the rock band. And after all these years, I'm still probably the best known flautist in popular music. So I'm pleased to be a flute player still. At least there's nobody else. Well, not many. A long time ago. And then I switched to playing the flute. So I think of my flute playing very much in the same way as I would play guitar. And when people ask me who is my main influence as a flute player, my answer is Eric Clapton, because I play my flute the way I think I hear Eric Clapton play the guitar. So I'm very much influenced by guitar playing when I play the flute. Started playing music professionally. There was a general mood of popular music which was very commercial, was songs that usually lasted 3 minutes, and was very much a pop music culture. But after a couple of years that I'd been playing, we had the birth of a new kind of music, progressive rock music, and music became much richer and much more interesting for people like me, because we were able to use lots of different influences, and we could make long songs that were 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 40 minutes long, and it became much more exciting as a time for musicians. But now, 20 years later, we have again the situation where music has to be always subject to very commercial pressures. The commercial pressures on a young musician today are to have hit singles and to make songs that only last 3 minutes again, and maybe to have a career as a musician that maybe only lasts 1 year or 2 years. So now is not such a good time, I think, for young musicians to start playing music, because they can't be as expressive or as inventive as they were maybe 18 years ago. But I think the time will come again, maybe soon, when progressive rock music or progressive popular music will again become more popular. Music always moves in cycles, and we've seen a change from pop music to progressive and more interesting music, back to pop music, and I'm sure we will see a rebirth of more interesting and complex rock music, which will be far more stimulating both for young people and for the older fans of rock music. Because we must remember today rock music appeals not only to people of 15 or 20 years old, but people who are 30 years old, or even, like me, 40 years old. We don't get too old to rock and roll just because we get to be 40, or even 50. American blues, we began as a blues band. For the first 6 or 8 months, we really just played the same kind of music as was being played by many different British blues bands in the clubs around England. But with the departure of our first guitar player, Mick Abrahams, who was then replaced by Martin Barr, who is still in Jethro Tull today, I began to write more of the songs and to try and utilize the influences of classical music, of Northern European folk music, and a little bit of jazz feeling, to try and make something which was a more eclectic kind of music, something a little richer in influences. Basically, I've always played what I want to play, not what other people tell me I should play, and I'm very lucky to be able to still be able to play the kind of music that I like, which is a very complicated mixture of lots of styles. It's to me about commerciality and about very quick success. There are lots of groups who have come to success in the 80s who have been very talented, people like Howard Jones, Nick Kershaw, but they've disappeared again because they had 3 hit singles and then people got tired of them. The reason they got tired is because their audience was an audience of pre-teens, 12 years old. And when people are 12 years old, they change their loyalty very quickly and decide to follow somebody else. I have a daughter who is 9 years old, and I said to her before I came to Brazil, what do you think of Rick Astley? Isn't he great? Trying to be the understanding father. And she replied, Rick Astley, ugh, he's for little kids. Okay, so that demonstrates the fact that when you have an audience that is very, very young, you will probably only have a very short success. And the success of Jethro Tull is because our audience has always been in the 20 to 30-year-old age group. Even when we started, that was the age of our audience. And those people are much more loyal, and they will allow you as an artist to even make mistakes, but they will still buy your next record. So for me, the 80s doesn't have that kind of a feeling of loyalty. It has a feeling of it being a very young audience, because everywhere in the world, record companies know that you can make more money selling to children, because children change their mind, and you can sell a new product next year to the same children again, rather than have only the same artist. You can have many, many artists, many, many records, sign them up for a low royalty, have 3 hit singles, and then they're dead as artists, which means the record companies can usually make more money and be more successful. That is the commercial pressure. I'm not saying it's wrong that record companies think that way, but that's the reality. So for groups like us, the older bands, or some of the younger bands now who are playing more progressive music, it's a much, much harder struggle to stay successful. But we will triumph.